Chapter 5. The Wisdom of the Parliament of Erl. In those golden days after the royal wedding, the people of Erl often came to the castle, their hands full of gifts and their hearts full of joy. The castle courtyard would echo with laughter, the clinking of goblets and the warm greetings of villagers eager to meet their new princess, the mysterious and radiant Lyrazel, who had stepped into their world from the land of legends. By twilight, small houses in the valley glowed with firelight. Over supper, families would sit together and speak with quiet pride. They would recall that one evening long ago when the elders of the village had gathered in the old lord's great red room and made a bold decision to send Alveric beyond the edge of the world in search of a bride from Elfland. And now, as they watched their land bloom with the magic of her presence, they believed they had chosen wisely. There was Narl, the blacksmith with arms like iron and a voice like thunder, who had first spoken on behalf of the village. Beside him sat Guhitch, the quiet upland farmer, whose idea had started it all, sparked by a late-night conversation with his thoughtful wife as they watched the stars over clover-covered hills. Nehich, a seasoned horse driver with weather-worn hands, nodded along. 4 strong men who sold cattle in distant markets leaned in as they spoke, men who knew the value of names and stories. Oath, the deer hunter, sharp-eyed and silent, listened carefully. And there was Vlel, the master plowman, whose furrows shaped the land like a sculptor shapes clay. Together with 3 others, these men had once walked into the long red chamber of the old Lord of Erl. That day, they had made a strange request to send Alveric beyond the boundaries of the world to bring back a bride from the realm of magic. Now, years later, as they sat together again, they spoke with pride of the wonders their choice had brought. Their dreams had always been simple: to see the Vale of Erl shine with the recognition they felt it deserved. They had pored over old histories, flipped through books on farming and pastures, and rarely did the name Erl appear. It was as though their valley, green and peaceful as it was, had been forgotten by the world. And then one evening, Guhitch had stood up and said, "Let us choose a path different from all others. Let our people be ruled by a lord of magic. Let his name and ours echo through the world. Let none ever forget the Vale of Erl." They had all celebrated that bold decision. And from their celebration was born a council, a small parliament of 12 determined men who had marched together to the grand hall of the old Lord of Erl. The events that followed became part of their shared legend. Now, in the quiet evenings, they often gathered in Narl's great forge, a place of glowing embers, the rhythmic scent of steel and smoke still lingering in the air. The forge was not just for crafting metal now. It had become their chamber of visions. Narl would disappear briefly into the back room and return with heavy clay mugs filled with golden mead, brewed from clover honey, thick and sweet, carrying the taste of summer fields and old dreams. Threll, the woodworker, would join last, brushing sawdust from his sleeves, smelling of pine in the deep forest. He'd nod respectfully to the others before sitting on the carved log bench near the hearth. As they sipped their warm mead, the talk would start with everyday matters, the weather over the uplands, the state of the pastures, the latest market news. But soon, as the warmth of the drink reached their hearts, their words would drift to greater things, to dreams of Erl's future. Through the flicker of firelight and mead-sweet haze, they would see visions, golden and glowing, of Erl rising in fame across distant lands. One would proudly speak of their strong cattle, raised on the richest grass. Another would boast of their spirited horses born from the windswept hills. Another praised the rich black soil, soft and deep, feeding all they sowed. And in all their words echoed a single belief, that one day, far-off cities and unknown valleys would speak with admiration of the Valley of Erl, a place of magic, pride, and greatness. Time, like a soft breeze over hills, came and went, carrying away those warm, hopeful evenings just as it had always moved over the Vale of Erl and every land under the sky. Seasons turned quietly, and spring returned once more, painting the fields with bluebells swaying like little bells of joy under the open sky. In the heart of this blooming season, when wild anemones carpeted the meadows in soft whites and purples, a whisper ran through the valley, light as birdsong and bright as morning. Alveric and Lyrazel had been blessed with a child, a son, and just like that, under a sky full of new leaves and fresh hope, a new chapter began in the story of Erl, the tale of a boy born of man and mystery, of earth and Elfland. The next night, the people of Erl built a massive bonfire on the hilltop. Flames roared high into the night sky as they danced in circles, laughing and celebrating with mugs of sweet mead in their hands. All day long, they had gathered logs and branches from the nearby wild woods to prepare for this moment. The fire's warm glow could be seen from faraway lands, casting flickering light across the dark hills. But on the distant pale blue peaks of the mountains of Elfland, not a single glimmer reached. That place remained untouched, as if frozen in time, unchanged by anything that happened in the world of men. When they finally grew tired from dancing around the great fire, the people of Erl sat down on the soft grass beneath the stars. There, in the flickering glow, they began to dream aloud about the future of their land, a future shaped by the newborn son of Alveric, who would carry magic in his blood from his mother, Rewritten. Some imagined him as a mighty leader who would guide them into glorious battles. Others saw him as a wise ruler who would bring deeper plowing, richer harvests, and a stronger connection to the land. But all of them agreed on one thing: their cattle would sell for better prices, and their valley would thrive like never before. Not a single soul slept that night. They danced, they dreamed, and they celebrated. Not just the birth of a child, but the dawn of a new destiny. And more than anything, they rejoiced that the name of Erl would finally echo far beyond their hills, known and respected in distant lands. Alveric searched the entire valley and beyond, climbing the soft hills and wandering through the fields, all in search of someone worthy to care for his newborn son, a child born of royal Elfland blood. But it wasn't easy. The villagers who were skilled with children trembled when they looked into the baby's eyes. There was a strange light there, not of this world, a flicker of starlight or ancient magic that made them uneasy. Days passed. Then one cold and windy morning, Alveric climbed the lonely hill where the old witch lived. He found her sitting in her doorway, gazing at nothing, neither blessing nor cursing the world, just lost in time. "Well," she said, looking up with a crooked smile, "did the sword bring you fortune?" Alveric sighed, his voice tired like a man carrying too many years. "Who really knows what brings fortune? We never see the end when we begin the journey." The old witch narrowed her eyes thoughtfully. Who knows the end, but we? "I married the daughter of the king of Elfland," Alveric said softly. "A fine step upward," she chuckled, leaning on her staff. "And now, we have a child," he continued. "But who can care for him? No ordinary woman dares. They're afraid of him, afraid of the light in his eyes." The witch tilted her head. "That's no task for a mere mortal." "That's why I've come," said Alveric, his voice steady now. "Will you come to the castle in Erl? Will you care for him, be his nurse? You're the only one in all these lands who understands anything of Elfland. My wife knows Elfland, but nothing of Earth." The old witch stood slowly, her joints creaking like ancient branches. She looked at Alveric for a long time and then simply said, "For the sake of the king, I will come." And so the old witch came down from her lonely hill, carrying a bundle of strange enchanted items, things that smelled of moonlight and whispered secrets of forgotten places. Her cloak billowed like shadows in the wind as she entered the castle of Erl. In that quiet stone chamber, lit by golden light from tall windows, the child, born of two worlds, was cradled by hands that had cast spells before men even dreamed of magic. She hummed lullabies that no one in the valley had ever heard before, songs carried across ages from the mysterious land of Elfland. Often, Lyrazel would sit beside her, both bent over the crib, watching the child sleep, his eyelids flickering with dreams from realms beyond. And in those moments, the two women would talk, not of daily chores or village gossip, but of the stars, of ancient winds, of glowing flowers that bloomed under moons no man had seen. Though the witch was 100 years old, full of wisdom hidden from the world of men, she found herself listening more than speaking, for it was Lyrazel, the daughter of the king of Elfland, who taught her. With a voice like distant bells and a mind untouched by earth's weight, Lyrazel spoke of things no book had ever written. Yet despite all her wonder and beauty, there was something she could never grasp: the ways of Earth, its customs, its rules, its slow, stubborn logic. The world around her remained a puzzle she would never solve. The old witch, with her timeless eyes and whispering hands, cared for the baby like he was made of starlight. She watched over him so gently, so magically, that he never once cried in his cradle, not even once. At dawn, she'd whisper a soft chant that made the morning sun seem warmer, brighter. By noon, her cheerful hum would fill the air with joy, like the laughter of wind chimes in a summer breeze. And when he had a cough, she'd place her cool hand on his chest, murmur an ancient rhyme, and the cough would vanish like mist at sunrise. The nursery, tucked high in one tower of the castle, was no ordinary room. When the witch spoke one secret word, the fireplace would leap to life, flames dancing up from enchanted logs. Shadows of toys, books, and strange objects would sway and flicker across the ceiling. Not frightening, but wild and merry, like stories come alive. Lyrazel was always there, her silken fingers brushing the baby's hair, humming songs from a realm where music had colors and air sparkled like glass. Together, she and the witch raised him not like a prince of earth, but like a child of wonder. He was loved like any child whose mother is simply human, but he was taught more. He knew the language of wind. He dreamed to melodies no other child ever heard. He carried in his heart not just lullabies, but runes, magical verses from Elfland that drifted through his soul like glowing embers in the night. The old witch moved silently through the nursery, her black staff tapping softly against the wooden floor, not just for support, but as a guardian's wand, protecting the baby with quiet, ancient spells. When the wind howled outside on stormy nights and a cold draft slipped in through some tiny crack, she whispered a chant, and the wind would hush like a scolded child. Even the kettle's whistle, normally just steam and sound, was turned into a song. Strange, haunting, almost like a distant message from fog-covered mountains or secret valleys no one had ever seen. And the baby, still too small to walk, began to understand the stories hidden in those notes. Stories of places his eyes had never reached. As dusk settled and the fire glowed, the witch would lift her black stick high, standing before the flickering flames. With a low chant and a sweep of her staff, the shadows on the walls would come alive, dancing, twisting, forming shapes both joyful and terrifying. Animals, monsters, dreams, and fears would swirl across the room like smoke. Camels and crocodiles, kind-eyed cows, wolves with glowing eyes, loyal dogs, and lurking creatures from old legends. She didn't just show him the world as it was, trees and rivers and everyday animals. She showed him the unseen, too. Things men only whisper about, things they fear in the night, and things they hope might exist in distant lands. All passed before him, shaped in smoke and shadow, until the nursery became his first window into both earth and myth. And on warm, golden afternoons, the witch would carry him through the village streets. Her crooked figure, wrapped in dark layers, always drew stares, and every dog barked madly at her as she passed. But none dared get too close. Behind her walked a quiet page boy, carrying the black staff like it was a weapon forged from midnight. And that was enough. Dogs, clever, cautious creatures, always know more than they let on. They can sense whether a man is bluffing or bold, if his hand holds kindness or cruelty. And they knew without doubt that the long black stick the page boy carried wasn't made for walking. It was powerful, unnatural, enchanted. So they stayed back, their hackles raised, ears pinned, eyes wide with ancient instinct. They snarled low from a distance, tails tucked but eyes watching, alert and unsure. Their barks echoed through the quiet village streets, drawing out curious faces from doorways and windows. And when the villagers stepped out and saw the strange old witch with the child in her arms and the eerie staff glowing faintly in the hands of the page behind her, their confusion turned to wonder. "It's her," they whispered. "Zerund Erl, the Hill Witch. A true sorceress. And she's nursing the air." Eyes widened and mouths hung open in disbelief mixed with delight. "A child raised by magic," they said, nodding. "There'll be wizardry in Erl now. Real wizardry. Our valley will be known far and wide." Hope sparked like kindling. The future looked golden. To keep up appearances, they scolded their dogs, shooing them indoors with sticks and stern voices. But the dogs, they didn't forget. Their instincts, sharpened by generations, told them this was something otherworldly, and instincts don't bend to human opinion. Later, when night blanketed the village and the forge of Gnarl glowed warm with firelight, the men gathered with mugs of mead in hand. They talked of glory and magic, of Erl's name echoing beyond distant hills, of the enchanted child who would lead them into a future filled with wonder. But outside, under silver moonlight, the dogs returned on soft paws to the empty streets, and they howled, low, eerie, mournful songs, not out of fear, but out of knowing. They sensed what the villagers could not. Magic had come to Erl, and it was only just beginning. Each morning, sunlight would pour into the high nursery windows, and with it came Lyrazel, the fairy princess from beyond the edge of time. Wherever she walked, a warm, otherworldly glow seemed to follow, something even the ancient witch with all her knowledge could never summon. She would lift her son into her arms and sing to him songs no human lips have ever sung. Songs from a world untouched by time, from lands beyond the twilight's edge where sorrow has no name and memories never fade. Her voice was like silver rain on soft petals, drifting through the open windows and across the village of Erl, leaving listeners below in wonder and silence. Some said the songs felt like dreams half remembered, or echoes from another life. And yet, even in all her magical melodies and timeless grace, it was she who sat in awe of him, her little boy with his very human giggles and curious fingers. She watched him stack stones and chase shadows, trip over rugs and laugh at falling feathers. And each simple act of humanness was, to her, a kind of miracle. Every clumsy hug, every mispronounced word was more marvelous than all the stars she'd known in her father's sky. For her, Earth was foreign, and her child, a mystery wrapped in warmth and wonder. He would grow day by day into this strange world of grass and gravity, and she would watch, enchanted, not by the magic she came from, but by the small, real things only humans do. And in her quiet heart, she loved him more deeply than she had ever loved her moonlit palace, more than the endless beauty of Elfland, more than all the glittering centuries of her unaging youth. She had crossed eternity for him. And in that nursery, with sunlight on the floor and lullabies in the air, Lyrazel, the timeless, had become something new, a mother. With each passing season, Alveric slowly began to understand a truth he had once refused to see. Lyrazel, his fairy bride, would never truly belong to this world. She wandered through the stone halls of the castle of Erl like a songbird caught in a room built of silence. The people of the valley, with their simple talk and grounded minds, were mysteries to her. She laughed at books of philosophy, as if they were the babbling of children trying to explain starlight with clay. She could not pretend to care for customs, for rules, for all the small things that anchored others to this earth. He had once hoped, naively maybe, that with time she'd adapt, that the strangeness of his world would fade in her eyes, that someday she'd feel at home among the courtyards and candlelight, the harvest feasts and old songs of men. But he came to see it clearly. She was like a wild spirit in a cage of stone, graceful, luminous, but never at ease. No matter how many moons rose over the valley, no matter how many fires warmed their hearth, she would always remain a creature shaped by a different sky. The truth hit him quietly one autumn evening as they sat beneath the stars. He looked at her, the tilt of her head, the faraway gleam in her eyes, the way she traced patterns in the air with her fingers, as if sketching constellations from another realm. And in that moment, he finally understood. Some hearts are carved from magic, not from time. And time, no matter how long, could never make her truly human. She was not meant to change, and he had to let go of the dream that she ever would. Between Alveric and Lyrazel stretched an invisible distance, not of miles, but of worlds. The space between Earth and Elfland, between reason and wonder, between roots and stars. And yet, love had built a bridge between them. A shining golden bridge made not of stone or magic, but of feeling, fragile, beautiful, real. But sometimes standing still in the quiet of his heart, Alveric would look down from that bridge, and what he saw made his soul tremble. Beneath their love lay a chasm too deep for any map, a vast, silent gulf of difference. Her timeless magic, his mortal doubts. Her dreams of starlit forests, his world of firelit rooms. Her soul made of moonlight, his made of earth. He asked himself, what lies at the end of all this? What happens when love is no longer enough to hold two different worlds together? And for the first time, the thought of the end scared him, more than the mystery of the beginning ever had. And as for Lyrazel, she never believed she needed to understand anything. Wasn't her beauty enough? Hadn't a man crossed through starlit fields and forgotten realms just to find her? Hadn't he pulled her from a life of lonely perfection, away from the eternal stillness of Elfland's palace, whispered only in song? Wasn't his arrival her answer? Why then must she change? Must she learn the dull customs of this stiff and silent world? Why shouldn't she dance barefoot in the street when the wind felt wild? Why shouldn't she giggle at funerals, speak kindly to goats, or sing to the moon when others slept? What good was joy if it had to be hidden behind rules? But Earth had rules, and soon she saw something that made her blood run cold. Just a flicker of it, a woman in the village, someone she'd passed many times. Her beauty, though still there, had faded, only slightly, but Lyrazel noticed, and her heart filled with fear. Could time touch her too? Could the endless days of Earth stain the eternal beauty that Elfland had never dared to touch? Panicked, she ran to Alveric, eyes wide, voice trembling. She wanted him to tell her it wasn't true, that time couldn't reach her, that she was safe. But he only looked at her with the quiet sorrow of a man who'd lived too long under the sun and sky. Time, he said gently, takes what it wants. We all live with it. What's the use in fighting? And in that moment, something inside her broke, not loudly, not visibly, but like a flower wilting in the dark. Chapter 6. The Rune of the Elf King. High above the shimmering spires of Elfland, on a lonely balcony of his radiant tower, the Elf King stood still. Far below, the echoes of 1,000 marble steps still lingered, fading like distant thunder. He had just lifted his ancient face to the sky, ready to sing the sacred rune, the spell that would bind his daughter Lyrazel to their timeless realm. But in that final moment, he saw her. He saw her step beyond the edge of Elfland, slipping past the glowing curtain of twilight that guarded their world. From his side, the barrier shimmered, soft, eternal, silver blue like moonlight caught in a dream. But beyond it, facing the mortal world, the veil was harsh, smoky, gray with sorrow, and she was gone. His voice faltered, the rune unsung, his power unspoken. Slowly he bowed his head. His silver beard fell like a river across the snow-white fur of his ermine mantle, draping over the deep royal blue of his cloak. He stood there, a figure carved in sorrow, motionless against the turning sky. And even though time does not touch Elfland, he could feel the years rush onward, not his but theirs, the fleeting lives in the fields beyond, where his daughter now walked among shadows and time. Still he stood, blue and white like frost and sky, against the silver stone of his towering spire. An ancient figure cloaked in silence, older than memory, shaped by times far beyond human reckoning. For before Elfland was lulled into its eternal stillness, he was already there, the one who shaped calm from chaos. Now, as he gazed into the distance where the twilight veil had parted, his heart wandered to his daughter, no longer in Elfland's embrace, but wandering in the harsh lands where time bites and beauty fades. Though Elfland lies beyond decay, the king's wisdom stretched farther, into the mortal world, into our brittle lives. He knew too well the sharpness of time, the wear and tear of emotion, the weight of sorrow that presses against every soul in the world beyond. He could already feel it circling her, the slow, invisible erosion of years, the dulling of wonder, the creeping touch of age. And to him, a being untouched by hours, who had seen centuries pass like shadows on a wall, her future in the world of men seemed tragically short, like a rose freshly plucked, foolishly sold on city streets, its beauty already wilting before the day is done. He knew. She was now under the curse of all things mortal, and nothing, not even the love of a prince, could keep that doom away. He stood still, silent, royal, timeless. But his thoughts ran wild, far from the still towers of Elfland. He imagined her, his daughter born of starlight and moon magic, dying, not here in the soft embrace of Elfland, but out there, in the cold, hard lands of men, buried beneath gray stone and forgetful skies, in a world that mocked all things magical, a world that had forgotten Elfland as if it were just a bedtime story. If he had not been king, the silent heart of Elfland's peace, he might have wept right there, wept for that radiant being now doomed to the decay of earth, or worse. Perhaps she would not die, but move on, beyond his sight, to some distant human paradise, one the old books whispered of, a heaven unknown to Elfland's timeless light. He imagined her glowing softly, wandering among hills heavy with eternal spring, blossoms falling gently around her like memories, apple trees in full bloom, golden light flickering through clouds, and around her silent spirits, the blessed, their halos dim gold, their eyes turned away. He saw her reach out, arms stretched with longing, toward the blue peaks of her true home, toward the twilight that shimmered around Elfland's edge. But no one answered her yearning, no one turned to see, and then, though he was the eternal king, whose soul held the magic of all Elfland in perfect calm, a tear fell, and that single tear shook the realm. Elfland trembled, just as a still lake shivers when something unseen touches it. So too did the eternal peace of that enchanted land quiver at his sorrow. The king of Elfland turned away from the edge of his silver balcony, his flowing cloak trailing behind like a ripple in moonlight. No longer calm, he moved with purpose, his footsteps echoing like thunder down the winding, brazen stairs of his tower. Step after step, his descent was swift, like a storm breaking the eternal stillness of Elfland. He reached the bottom and came crashing through the great ivory doors, carved with ancient runes and locked by spells no mortal had ever spoken. They swung open silently despite their size, sensing their master's urgency. He entered the throne room, a vast hall shimmering with a soft, glowing light, where time stood still and even echoes dared not speak without permission. The walls were made of crystal and silver, glowing with shifting colors of dawn and dusk. Only the oldest songs dared to describe this place, and even they fell short. At the center of the room stood a coffer of deep sapphire, sealed with forgotten magic. The king opened it with a single word that shimmered in the air like stardust. From within, he pulled a scroll of eternal parchment. No age could yellow it. And from the case beside it, he drew a feather from a beast no longer remembered, a plume that shimmered between shadow and flame. He dipped the feather into ink not of this world, an ink that moved like liquid starlight. And with steady, ancient hands, he began to write. A rune, powerful and precise, glowing as each symbol formed. The rune pulsed with magic. When he finished, the air around the scroll trembled. Then, lifting two fingers, he whispered the words of summoning, a minor enchantment, once enough to shake the ground and fill the room with his elite guard, but no one came. The silence was sudden, heavy, wrong. The king's eyes narrowed. The stillness in the room wasn't peace, it was warning. Something had changed. They say time does not exist in Elfland. And in a way, it's true. There in that golden realm wrapped in eternal twilight, nothing ages, nothing fades. The flowers bloom forever in their first breath of color. The wind hums an everlasting lullaby, and beauty doesn't chase after change. It simply is. Still, timeless, perfect. But time is a tricky thing. It slips in unnoticed, not with ticking clocks, but through moments. And even in Elfland, when something new dares to happen, that very act pulls at the threads of stillness. For centuries, Elfland slept beneath a spell of endless serenity. No death, no decay, no desire for what's next. Just endless wonder, like a painting that dreams. But the mind of a powerful wizard is not so easily still. When thought awakens, when a will reaches outward, when a longing for something different rises, the calm shivers, the air stirs, like dropping a stone into the heart of a deep, enchanted lake. Imagine it, a glowing, silent pool in a forgotten forest, where even light seems to sleep. Below the surface, ancient creatures dream, green weeds sway in eternal stillness, and colors rest like sighs from another world. Now throw something strange into that water, A stone from far away, something foreign, something real, and the pool reacts. The great fish shifts, the weeds tremble, the sleeping light begins to dance, the whole pool moves, just for a moment. Then silence returns, but not untouched. That's what happened when Alveric crossed the twilight border, stepping from the world we know into the enchanted woods of Elfland. His presence, his purpose, it was not born of that timeless realm. And so, even the king stirred, even Elfland shook, even time for a heartbeat awoke. When no guards arrived, the elven king stilled. A silence thicker than the air wrapped around him, not of peace, but of warning. He turned his gaze outward, not with eyes alone, but with ancient magic older than the stars. Through silver walls, through the whispering forests, beyond the shimmer of Elfland, he looked, and there, in the heart of the trembling woods, he saw them, his 4 knights, his elite, once forged by his earliest spells, shaped with runes born before even time dared enter Elfland. Now they lay broken on the mossy ground, thick shimmering elvish blood seeping from gashes in their radiant armor. They had fallen. The trees above them still quivered, disturbed by what had passed, by Alveric, the mortal who had breached their timeless borders. The king felt it, not just in the trembling leaves, but in the magic of the land itself, shivering like a harp string just touched. Without a word, he strode through a portal of pure light, its frame humming with enchantment. He walked across the glowing lawn, a place that knew neither sorrow nor shadow, his cloak trailing stardust behind him. And then he reached them, his guardians, once unstoppable, now still. He stood beneath the murmuring trees, his presence both terrible and sorrowful. The forest hadn't settled. Something had come that didn't belong, and it had changed everything. There was powerful magic here, the King of Elfland said, his voice deep and distant, like thunder behind a dream. He knelt beside the fallen knight, the eldest, the first he had ever created with spell and rune when the world was still young. His hand hovered over the lifeless armor, moonlight catching on the cracks where enchanted steel had split like paper. He had only 3 supreme runes, spells so ancient they could be spoken only once. One was already written on sacred parchment, to summon his daughter home. Now he spoke the second. The air itself froze as the words left his lips, slow, deliberate, glowing like embers in the silence. A hum passed through the trees. The grass leaned toward the sound, the sky dimmed. Then, silence. And suddenly the rents in the knight's glowing armor snapped shut with a metallic whisper. His wounds vanished, his blood gone as if never spilled. The knight gasped, then slowly rose to his feet, eyes shining like starlight, alive once more. The king stood quietly. Now only one rune remained, his last, his greatest, a magic older than time, a spell mightier than any known to gods or mortals. He looked at the other 3 knights. They would not return. They had no souls, only enchantment. And so, like candlelight returning to the flame, their magic drifted back to him, fading into his mind, quiet and complete. Without another word, he turned and began walking back toward the palace, his cloak brushing through the grass like a shadow of the moon. Behind him, the last surviving knight waited, and from deep within Elfland, the king whispered a command. "Bring me a troll, small and wiry, no taller than a child, but with the ancient eyes of the earth itself." The trolls of Elfland were a secretive and mischievous race, dark-skinned like deep roots and quick as whispers in a storm. Suddenly, a scuttling sound echoed through the towering throne room of moonstone and shadow. It was like the rustling of dry leaves, the patter of rain in hollow caves. Then, with a final leap, a troll landed near the foot of the throne, barefoot and bright-eyed, lit from above by shafts of silver light pouring down from the enchanted ceiling. The old king, still cloaked in the stillness of ancient grief, looked down at the little being. In one hand, he held a parchment inscribed with his most sacred rune, a spell written with ink not of this world. Slowly he handed it to the troll. "Run swiftly," the king said, his voice heavy with age and power, "beyond the borders of our land, cross the edge of twilight, where Elfland fades into the world of men. Find my daughter Lyrazel, lost to the haunts of mortals. Give her this rune. When she reads it, she will know. and all shall be well." The troll nodded once, then spun around and darted from the room, a blur of bare feet and brown skin, vanishing down golden corridors with the speed of magic itself. Through glowing forests and silent fields the troll bounded, leaping from starlight to shadow, until the glowing edge of Elfland's twilight border loomed ahead, that place where dreams grow thin and reality begins. The troll crossed it and was gone. And then, all of Elfland fell still. Nothing stirred. The trees ceased their whispering, the silver streams froze in their glimmering arcs. The grass bowed in silence, and upon his mighty throne, carved from moonlight and mystery, the King of Elfland sat alone, unmoving. A figure of sorrow and starlight wrapped in silence, waiting for a daughter lost.